cold night in April, the shadow of approaching artillery fire could be felt in the streets of Zwolle. In the spring of 1945, the war in Europe was nearing its end. The Third Reich was collapsing. Yet retreating German units were still disciplined, still dangerous, and across the Netherlands they continued to form pockets of resistance. For the Dutch people, the occupation had lasted 5 years. Hunger, executions, and forced labor had become part of daily life. As Canadian forces pushed northward, every city stood as a potential battlefield. Zwolle was one of those cities. Because of its strategic location, it was defended by German troops. Nearly 1,000 soldiers were stationed there. For Canadian commanders, the military calculation was simple. If resistance continued, heavy artillery would be used. The method was fast and effective, but much of the historic city center would be destroyed, and civilian casualties would be unavoidable. An alternative was needed. At that moment, a young Canadian corporal volunteered. His name was Léo Major. Major was born in Quebec in 1921. He was disciplined, yet resistant to authority. In 1944, after the Normandy landings, he was sent to the European front at just 22 years old. During the Battle of the Scheldt, a grenade explosion cost him his left eye. By the standards of war, this meant the end of a front-line career. A soldier without full depth perception was not expected to remain in active combat. Major disagreed. He insisted he could still aim with one eye. He refused medical evacuation and returned to the front. The decision revealed less about his physical endurance and more about his stubborn resolve. For Major, the war had become personal. Later that same year, during a reconnaissance mission, he managed to force the surrender of more than 90 German soldiers. He relied not on brute force, but on psychological pressure. The night of Zwolle would become the most striking example of that approach. On April 13, 1945, Canadian forces reached the outskirts of Zwolle. The scale of German resistance inside the city was unclear. If street fighting erupted, casualties would be high. Major and his close friend, Corporal Arsenault, volunteered for a night reconnaissance mission. Their objective was not only to gather intelligence. If possible, they intended to create enough confusion to force the Germans to withdraw. Shortly after midnight, they slipped into the city. They soon encountered a German patrol. A firefight broke out. Arsenault was shot and killed. Major was now alone. At that point, he was expected to withdraw. The mission was effectively over, but retreating would almost certainly mean an artillery bombardment at dawn. Major chose to continue. Moving through Zwolle's narrow streets, he created systematic chaos. He opened fire from different locations, threw grenades, and constantly changed position, giving the impression that a large Canadian force had entered the city. The tactic itself was not new. What made it extraordinary was that he was doing it alone. Throughout the night, German radio traffic reported the same message. A significant Canadian force had penetrated the city center. Panic began to spread. Major captured a German officer and delivered a clear warning. If the troops did not abandon the city, heavy bombardment would begin in the morning. It was partly a bluff. But under the circumstances, it was believable. For an army already in retreat, holding the city was no longer a strategic priority. The risk was not worth it. Throughout the night, German units began withdrawing from Zwolle. On the morning of April 14th, Canadian forces entered the city and encountered no organized resistance. Zwolle had been liberated largely without a fight. The artillery strike was canceled. The civilians were alive. Major's one-man operation had prevented a devastating urban battle. This was not a classic heroic charge. It was a psychological maneuver, risky, calculated, and nearly impossible. And it worked. Major was later offered a Distinguished Conduct Medal. He refused his first decoration due to a disagreement with his commanding officer. In the years that followed, his courage was formally recognized. He would return to combat during the Korean War, once again holding defensive positions against numerically superior forces. But the event that secured his place in history was the night in Zwolle. Today, the city of Zwolle in the Netherlands officially honors him. A street bears his name. In local memory, he is remembered as the man who saved the city from destruction. Léo Major's story reminds us that war is not shaped only by grand strategies and massive offensives. Sometimes, a single decision on a single night can alter the fate of thousands.